All right, so for lesson 10, what we want to do is we want to basically kind of sum up all of the transformations that we've talked about. So we've talked about shifting, we've done reflections, and we've done stretching and squashing. So that's why it says here that we're going to want to refer to the lesson notes for lessons 2, 4, 8, and 9. So our goal for each of these examples here is to simply identify each of the transformations based on the function notation. So essentially the opposite of what we've been doing. So some of these, there's only one transformation going on. Some of these, there's multiple transformations going on. And so we'll go through each of these individually, and we'll see what happens. So let's start with number one. So g of x equals f of 2x. The first thing I notice is that I have multiply by 2 inside the parentheses here. So I'm multiplying by 2 inside the parentheses here. So this tells me that it's either going to be a stretch or a squash. When I have multiplication going on, that tells me it's going to be a stretch or a squash. So I'm going to look back at my lesson notes from lesson 8 and 9. All right. And if I look at 8, for example, notice with 8, for a vertical stretch and squash, the multiplication goes outside the parentheses. So this is going to be a horizontal stretch or squash. Now notice in this case, we're multiplying by 2 inside the parentheses. So 2 is greater than 1. So this is going to be a horizontal squash. So this is a horizontal squash. Okay. And then the factor in this case, remember with horizontal, we have to do opposites. Okay. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is multiplying by a half. Okay. So this is a horizontal squash by a factor of 1/2. A horizontal squash by a factor of 1/2. And that is it. Okay. Number 2, notice we're doing pretty much the same thing, except now the multiplying by 2 is outside the parentheses. So outside the parentheses tells me this is going to be a vertical stretch or squash. In this case, with vertical stretches and squashes, we don't do the opposite. So because 2 is greater than 1, this is going to be a vertical stretch. So 2 is greater than 1. So this is going to be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2 since we don't need to do the opposite. So a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Number 3, m of x equals f of x plus 2. So now notice we're adding and we're inside the parentheses. So whenever we're involving adding and subtracting, that tells me it's going to be a translation or a shift. So that goes all the way back here to lesson 2. Okay. And in this particular case, because because it is inside the parentheses, the plus 2 is inside the parentheses, this is going to be a horizontal shift. So we know this is going to be a horizontal shift. A horizontal shift. Now, normally, plus 2 would mean right 2, but with horizontal shift, inside lies means we do the opposite. So the opposite of plus 2 is minus 2. So this is a horizontal shift left 2. Okay. Number 4, same thing, except notice the minus 2 is outside the parentheses. So this is going to be a vertical shift. A vertical shift, and it's going to be up or down 2. So with vertical shifts, the outside is true, meaning we don't do the opposites. So minus 2 means down 2. So this is a vertical shift down 2. All right. So number 5. Number 5 is an interesting one here. So number 5, I'm going to open up here. I'm actually going to open up a new drawing, so I leave myself some room here. So for number 5, let's rewrite this. So it's 3p of x equals 3f2 of x minus 4. So p of x equals 3f actually 3f of 2x minus 4. Okay, did I copy that right? Number 5, yeah. So this one there's multiple. You can see I actually have 3 transformations going on here. I have one here, I have one here, and I have one here. So I'm going to identify all 3 of those one by one. So the first things first is I'm going to look at this one right here. So the multiplying by 3 outside the parentheses. So the multiplying by 3 outside the parentheses, okay? Outside the parentheses, multiplying by 3 tells me that this is going to be a vertical stretch or squash. In this case, it's not going to be an opposite. Okay, so in this case, we're multiplying by 3 outside the parentheses. So this is greater than 1. 3 is greater than 1. So this is a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Okay, remember with vertical stretches and squashes, I don't need to do the opposite as it says here. Okay, so I dealt with that. All right, so we'll go one by one here. So let me change the color. So now I'm going to deal with this one right here. So now I'm multiplying by 2 inside the parentheses. All right, so multiplying inside the parentheses tells me that this is going to be a horizontal stretch or squash, but the key in this time is that we're doing the opposites. So 2 is greater than 1, so this is going to be a horizontal squash, by a factor of, because we have to do opposites, the opposite of multiplying by 2 is multiplying by half. So we'll say that this is a horizontal squash by a factor of 1/2. So that is the second one. The third one that we're going to look at is the minus 4. Okay, in this case, we're minusing 4 outside the parentheses. So minus 4 outside the parentheses tells me that it's going to be a shift. More specifically, it's going to be a vertical shift. So this is going to be a vertical shift, and it's either going to be up or down 4. When we do vertical shifts, I don't do opposites. Outside is true. So minus 4 means down 4. So vertical shift down 4. So number 5 had 3 transformations. A vertical stretch by a factor of 3, a horizontal squash by a factor of a half, and a vertical shift down 4. Okay, let's go to number 6 now. So number 6 is going to be f q of x equals f of 3x minus 4 plus 1. Okay, so again, this one has 3 different transformations. I have this, I have the minus 4, and I have the plus 1. Okay, so let's again do this one by one. So multiplying by 3 inside the parentheses. Multiplying by 3 inside the parentheses tells me this is going to be a horizontal stretch or squash. 3 is greater than 1. So this is going to be a horizontal squash, okay? And we have to do the opposite. So horizontal squash by a factor of opposite of multiplying by 3 is multiplying by 1/3. Again, we have to do opposites here. Okay, next one we have to deal with is the minus 4. Okay, that tells me it's going to be a horizontal shift. So this is a horizontal shift. And if we go back to our lesson notes from lesson 2, horizontal shift inside lies, so we got to do the opposite. So minus 4 would normally be left 4, but in this case, it's going to be the opposite of that, which is right 4. So horizontal shift right 4. And then the last one is the plus 1. So that's going to be a vertical shift. And remember, with vertical shifts, we don't have to do the opposite. So this will be a vertical shift up 1. So those are your 3 transformations for number 6. Number 7, okay. Number 7 is r of x equals f of negative x plus 1. Okay, so this one, there's only 2 transformations. I have the negative here, and I have the plus 1 here. I'm going to do the easy one first, because again, it doesn't really matter the order we do them in. So I don't know what's going on here. Here we go. So let's first do the plus 1. So the plus 1 outside the parentheses tells me that this is going to be a vertical shift up 1. Okay, outside the parentheses, we don't do the opposites. So plus 1 means up 1. Okay, so the other one we have to deal with is the negative. Okay, the negative inside the parentheses. Well, the one that we haven't dealt with is lesson 4. That was on reflections. Okay, now notice in this one, the negative is inside the parentheses. So in this case, the negative is inside the parentheses. Negative inside the parentheses tells me that it's a reflection across the y-axis. So the negative inside the parentheses tells me that this is a y-axis reflection. So those are the 2 transformations, a vertical shift up 1 and a y-axis reflection. All right. And that was it for number 7. Number 8, we're down to the last one. All right, so number 8 is t of x equals negative 3 f of 2x minus 4. Okay, so let's think about this one here. This one we have several going on. Okay, I have the -4. I have this one. I have the 3, but I also have that negative. So there's 4 different transformations going on here. So let's start from the left here. Let's first do this minus here. The negative outside the parentheses. So again, there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So let's first deal with the negative here. The negative tells me that it's going to be a reflection. Okay, the negative outside the parentheses. So negative outside the parentheses, negative goes outside, tells me that this is going to be an x-axis reflection. So that's the first one, an x-axis reflection. Okay. The next one we have is the multiplying by 3 outside the parentheses. Multiplying by 3 outside the parentheses, multiplying outside the parentheses tells me that this is going to be a vertical stretch. In this case, I'm multiplying by 3, which is greater than 1. So this will be a vertical stretch. A vertical stretch by a factor of, do I have to do opposites here? Nope. So by a factor of 3. The next one I have to deal with is the multiplying by 2. So that's this one right here. So this is going to be a horizontal one, a horizontal stretch or squash. So in this case, we're multiplying by 2, which is greater than 1. So this is going to be a horizontal squash by a factor of, I have to do opposites. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is multiplying by a half. So horizontal squash by a factor of 1/2. And then the last one is the -4. Okay, so the -4 outside the parentheses. Okay, that tells me that this is going to be a vertical shift. Okay, vertical shift. All right, because it's outside. Outside is true. So -4. -4 tells me that this is a vertical shift down 4. So those are my 3 transformations. My 4 transformations. X-axis reflection, vertical stretch by a factor of 3, horizontal squash by a factor of 1/2, and a vertical shift down 4. That is it for lesson 10.